Good evening, folks. There are two important things going on in the world tonight. One of them is the Leafs named a new captain and start their season as John Tavares, if you're tuned in here, and thank you for being tuned in here. Number two, though, is an election debate for Hamilton Centre. And that is why you're here, because the other thing that is important that is going on, arguably more important, although some may disagree, but would be the federal election, which is a chance for you to participate in our democracy. You can't participate with the Leafs. Sadly, you can participate by voting. And the first step towards that is for you to listen to what the candidates, we have 5 of them here, who will be making a case, to listen to what the candidates have to say, to hear them out, to see if you agree, if you disagree, to see where your agreements lie and decide who you're going to vote for on October 21st. And hopefully you will vote on October 21st. My name is Scott Radley, coming to you live from the Spectator Auditorium. I'm a columnist here at the Hamilton Spectator, also the host of the Scott Radley Show on 900 CHML Radio. On stage in front of me, I'd like to introduce the candidates who are here tonight. Alphabetically, Monica Ciriello from the Conservative Party of Canada, Matthew Green from the New Democratic Party, Jasper Kajavsky from the Liberal Party of Canada, Jason Lopez from the Green Party of Canada, and Melina Mamoni from the People's Party of Canada. Here is how we're going to do this tonight. Each candidate right off the bat tonight is going to get 2 minutes to make an opening statement in alphabetical order as they've been introduced. I will then be asking them a number of questions that have been submitted by readers of the Spectator, viewers of Cable 14 and others. Those will be answered by random draw. We drew numbers before the debate tonight. Those have been set out. That will be the order the questions are asked. They will have 1 minute to answer those questions. Following that, there will be an open forum where each candidate in that same order will be able to ask any other candidate a question. That candidate who is asked the question will have time to answer, and then it will be an open forum where everybody can jump in and have their say. They will then have a 1 minute closing statement at the end. Now, the one thing, when I keep saying the time, we are going to be strict with the time today. We have a limited window. So the 60 seconds or the 2 minutes, that will be strictly adhered to. Everyone has been told of that up front. So if I jump in and cut them off, I'm not being rude. We're simply following the rules. And when we are done today, if you hear part of the debate and you think, I want to hear that again, or I didn't catch all of that, or I had to leave to go look after the baby, or whatever else, you can see these debates, all 5 of them for all 5 ridings, will be replayed on Cable 14 right up until the election. You can go to cable14now.com and see them online. The spec.com will also have them there. Let us begin with the opening statements now, beginning with Monica Ciriello from the Conservative Party of Canada. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks to those of you tuning in tonight. And thank you to Channel 14 and the Hamilton Spectator for handling this event. I'm here tonight having knocked on thousands of doors throughout the riding of Hamilton Centre, hearing from and speaking with residents that are so frustrated because they work so hard. They're following all of the rules, but they feel that they are getting farther and farther behind. They feel forgotten by our current government. The Liberals said that they would help us. Instead, they introduced a carbon tax, which is not reducing emissions. It is only making life more expensive for families and small businesses. I recently met a retired couple, seniors still living in the family home. They said, Monica, as the result of a carbon tax, we choose between heating and eating because we simply can't afford both. Or the young mother that can't afford to turn on her heat now in the winter. Residents are asking themselves, do I eat, feed my children, or heat my home? I have been a public servant throughout my legal career, including right here at the City of Hamilton. I've had the opportunity to work with residents and small business owners when drafting the city's bylaws. Small business owners create jobs and are the vital backbone to our community. I work to cut unnecessary regulation and remove outdated policies. When you work hard, the government should help you and not stand in your way. While the Liberals and the NDP would rather spend your money, the Conservatives know money is best spent by you. We believe that you know what is most important for you and your family. This is why we're going to leave more money in your pocket and ensure you get ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to make the opening statement, Matthew Green from the New Democratic Party.
Given what's at stake this federal election, I think a lot about my time back on City Council. I think about the people that I met, and I think about their stories. I think about the single mom struggling for 2 jobs just to get by and raise her family, while the cost of rent continues to rise and her wages stay low. I think about the seniors who worked for decades to put aside their benefits and pensions only to see them stolen in retirement by greedy corporations declaring bankruptcy while the government stands by and does nothing. I think about my son. And I think about his entire generation who are about to inherit catastrophic climate change unless we make a significant and radical shift in our economy in order to save the planet. And over the next hour or so, you will hear directly from my colleagues and I about the platforms and plans from our respective parties for Hamilton Centre. And some might suggest that the future of our government programs and services are best left up to the private sector, to big businesses and big developers. In fact, they might even suggest the best role the government can play is in a private and public partnerships, or P3s as they're called. But what they really mean is private companies and big developers profiting off of taxpayer-owned public properties. As a New Democrat, I don't believe that government is just some game of let's make a deal. So I'd like to ask the viewers tonight to pay close attention to see what each candidate is in this for. Because the only deal that I'm interested in making is a new democratic new deal for the people. And the only people that I'm in this for are you, my friends and my neighbors who live alongside me right here in Hamilton Centre. Tonight, I'm honored to share my hopes of a more caring and compassionate Canada, one that defends the environment and doesn't leave our seniors and our workers and all of our residents here in Hamilton Centre further behind. A Canada where we take care of each other by extending our health care from head to toe and ensuring that everybody has a safe and dignified, affordable place to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now from the Liberal Party of Canada, Jasper Kujaski.
Thank you very much. First, I just want to acknowledge and state our respect for our Indigenous peoples as we meet on their ancestral lands. As a former parliamentary assistant, I have a long-standing interest and experience in political life. As an immigration lawyer, I helped many people from some of the most difficult situations in the world find refuge and freedom in Canada. As a prosecutor, I had direct responsibility for a new program specifically designed to protect the victims of domestic violence and spousal abuse. As a community builder, I have worked on a number of projects to see Hamilton, and specifically its urban core, realize its downtown and waterfront potential. In the last 4 years, our Liberal government has worked hard on a progressive agenda to reverse a decade of conservative cuts that devastated middle-class families and ignored the poor and marginalized in our society. The Liberal government has raised the guaranteed income supplement for seniors, introduced the Canada Child Benefits, and lowered taxes for over 9 million middle-class Canadians. The Liberal government has created over 1 million new jobs, with fully 75% of them full-time. We introduced the first ever National Poverty Reduction Strategy, and for the first time ever, we put a price on pollution. We have important issues to address here in the heart of Hamilton: affordable housing, climate change, poverty reduction, good middle-class jobs, caring for our seniors and our children, and protecting our steelworkers. We have accomplished much together, but much more needs to be done. I'm asking for your vote so that together we can continue moving the great city of Hamilton forward.
Thank you very much. From the Green Party of Canada, Jason Lopez.
Hi, I'm Jason Lopez, and I'm the Green Party candidate for Hamilton Centre. I've lived in Hamilton all my life, the son of immigrant parents from Colombia. When my father emigrated here almost 50 years ago, he chose Canada because it's the best country in the world. And he came to Hamilton because this was the place where you could get a good quality manufacturing job with benefits, buy an affordable home, and raise a family. But now in 2019, I find myself thinking about my own family. Will my young children grow up to have full-time jobs? Or will they be like many today, mired in precarious employment, not knowing where their next paycheck is going to come from? Will they be able to afford their own home? Or will that be a dream that's forever out of their reach? Will they have access to quality post-secondary education without the burden of crushing student debt? But most of all, I worry about the breakdown of our climate. And I worry about the planet that they will inherit when they're my age. The Liberal government has had 4 years to do a serious reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Yet today, Canada is the #1 per capita greenhouse gas emitter in the world of the G20 nations. And greenhouse gases are going up again. The Green Party is the only party, and I stress this, the only party committed to the 50% reduction target stated by the IPCC. We've been advocating for serious climate action since 1983, and it permeates every aspect of our platform. The time to be blinded is over. We need serious leadership. It's time to take action. It's time to vote green.
Thank you very much. From the People's Party of Canada, Melina Mamone.
Good evening. This federal election, like no other in recent times, provides Canadians with a viable option about which leader is most outfitted to manage Canada's present-day challenges, such as uncontrolled immigration, in a fair-minded and competent manner. For those who refuse to appreciate the efforts of immigration on Canada's economy, infrastructure, and housing, Bernier is committed to debate and confront the topic, while others will contract it. The PPC value bases individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect serve as the building blocks to formulate policies and programs both locally and on the global stage. As a PPC candidate for Hamilton Centre, I'm a Canadian-born resident with Italian ancestry, and I've witnessed the transformation of Hamilton's demographics for more than 4 decades. I hold a master's degree in global studies from McMaster University with a focus on immigration, which speaks of my detailed understanding of important issues such as population movement, environment, and economic pressures. Viewed another way is the awareness of the interconnected age and how this age of interconnectedness influences local communities like Hamilton. I have garnered more than 10 years of research experience with a social, environmental, and natural science background, including fieldwork in a developing context. My research assignments include the extensive examination of the current health crisis in Grassy Narrows and the critical examination of the relation between migration and infectious diseases. Together with the PPC's 4 guiding principles and my ability to analyze issues via a multi-factor approach fosters responsible governance that benefits all Canadians equally.
Thank you very much to all of you. We will now go to a number of questions. As I said off the top, some of these have come from viewers of Cable 14, some have come from readers of the Hamilton Spectator. We drew numbers beforehand, and going first today will be Jasper Kajaski from the Liberal Party. Prior to entering this race, you helped generate an investigation and report on the State of First Ontario Centre, the arena in downtown Hamilton. When that report was filed, you were quoted by reporter Kevin Werner as saying Hamilton needs a major league arena. Now, we know this issue is on the front burner now with a number of councillors running for the hills at the thought of spending public money on this, which is what the Ernst & Young report that came out said should be done, a new building or an upgrade of the building. Just today, it was the subject of a long meeting at City Hall. Would you as MP fight for money to fund a new arena in downtown or somewhere else in Hamilton?
The issue of the arena in regard to federal funding, it's not eligible for federal funds from the perspective of being a professional sports arena. The entire the study that we commissioned and was privately funded, not publicly funded, back in 2015, 2016, the arena renovation study, was premised on the concept that it would be done primarily through private sector funds working in partnership with the city. And now we have a much different debate going on. It's not really a federal debate, obviously, in terms of whether or not there's going to be a much smaller arena built in another part of the city, whether there's going to be a 10,000-seat arena built downtown, or whether it's the renovation of what used to be Cops Coliseum First Ontario Centre. It would not be caught under the umbrella of a federal funding program. The only way that could happen.
Sorry, 10 seconds. Yep. Thank you very much. Jason Lopez from the Green Party of Canada. On your website, you say the Green Party does not believe in increasing debt and the burden it creates for future generations. Yet your own party has said it would run a $22.7 billion deficit. That is a lot of money. Elizabeth May says you would be running surpluses within 4 years. So since you won't be cutting any services and since economists at the University of Ottawa who costed your program said it failed to make realistic and credible economic and fiscal projections. Is it fair to conclude that if you were to balance the budget, it would be done on the backs of massive tax hikes?
Thanks for the question, Scott. So no, it's not going to be based on massive tax hikes for individuals, but we are looking for new sources of revenue. So one example would be companies that have never paid any tax in history, such as your Amazons, your Facebooks, your Googles. These are companies that are taking revenue away from places like the Hamilton Spectator, places like small businesses where I work, where I compete with Amazon on a daily basis. We're also taking taxes from the commercial banks, a 5% surtax on the big 5 banks. I'm pretty sure that they can afford it since they've been collecting interest off of student loans for years. We're also introducing a financial transaction tax, which is going to generate approximately $15 billion in revenue. And while we're doing that, we're also decreasing Interact fees to a maximum of $1 and not allowing your bank to charge you fees for taking money out of your own machine. So we're doing things to collect more revenue and protecting people. In addition to that, we're also capping credit card rates at 10% above prime, because we feel that while we're collecting revenue, we need to do what we can for affordability.
Monica Suriello from the Conservative Party of Canada. We know what's happened to the housing market in this city in recent years. Prices are through the roof. Your riding has some of the fastest rising prices in the area. Now, your party has proposed reviewing the stress test and increasing amortization limits. And while that might work in some places in Canada where the prices are much lower and a few extra dollars here or there might be the difference between owning or not owning a home, how would that solve the problem here where the average price is now $600,000 for a house, and that is seeming way out of reach to many people?
Thank you for the question. You're absolutely correct. We are facing a housing crisis here in Hamilton, and quite frankly, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have really put the dream of home ownership further and further out of reach for Hamiltonians and those that want to call Hamilton home. A home is where memories are made. It's where conversations take place around a dinner table. It's where people come together and celebrate. And Conservatives prioritize home ownership. And we're the only party that is going to help you ensure you can buy your first home, especially here in Hamilton. We've talked about our 4-point plan. And in addition to fixing the mortgage stress test, which has disproportionately had a negative impact on young Canadians trying to enter the market, we are also going to increase the mortgage time to pay, so we lower your monthly payments, and we're going to look at surplus federal real estate that can be developed and increase the supply of housing in our community.
Thank you. Matthew Green from the New Democratic Party. Transportation is a big issue in your riding. Your party's platform calls for a significant expansion of public transit, more routes, better service in rural areas, and eventually fare-free rides on public transit. Now, you've been a city councillor, as you mentioned. You understand the challenges when money is taken away from a city or from council. Making riding free would remove millions of dollars a year in revenues from the city. And if you do the same in cities all across the country, we're talking billions of dollars. So would an NDP government guarantee 100% coverage of these lost fares, or would the cost be downloaded to the province or to the cities?
One of the things I'm most proud of working on as a city councillor was public transit. It's what gets people to and from their jobs and from work and to the services that they need. And as a New Democrat, I am very proud to offer a climate plan that includes transit at the forefront of a just transition away from a carbon economy. We're going to do that by ending subsidies to the oil and gas sector. Currently, we are subsidizing them in the billions of dollars. We have a Liberal government who just bought a $10 billion pipeline, and they are at a situation right now, we're going to provide operational funding directly to municipalities. So it won't be a situation of municipalities losing out on funding. Quite the contrary. Municipalities right now have an undue burden of paying for transit without having provincial and federal partners for operational funding.
Thank you. Melina Mamoni from the People's Party. Maxime Bernier told the Calgary Sun the other day there will be no climate change plan coming from the PPC, yet climate is listed as the third highest priority on some election polls. Is not having a climate plan not essentially guaranteeing that a huge majority of Canadians will not take you seriously?
Just to be clear, he does have a plan on climate change. The issue that he's challenging is this politicized part of hysteria, where there's conflicting sentiments with regards to the CO2, with the CO2 theory. And as mentioned earlier, these catastrophes like the new ice age by the year 2000 and the ozone layer have not occurred. In fact, in recent times, CO2 has been and can be reduced in the past without a carbon tax or the Paris Climate Accord. In fact, Australia dismantled its carbon tax because it crippled businesses. PPC prefers to deal with climate change from a view of rationale and facts, not from fear and hysteria. What it will do is stop sending billions of dollars to developing countries to reduce their emissions, and it will prioritize implementing practical solutions to make Canada's air, water, and soil cleaner, including bringing clean drinking water to the remote areas of the First Nations. It will not impose a federal tax nor cap and trade. If you want a carbon tax, you should vote for a premier that supports it.
Jasper Kajewski from the Liberal Party, your website says you will, and this is a quote, focus intensely on addressing the crucial issues related to the steel industry, including reviewing bankruptcy and insolvency laws to protect pensioners. Now, I'm sure the steelworkers, many of whom were here last night, will be thrilled to hear that. That said, the Liberals have had 4 years to do this and haven't. Why should we believe they'll be more successful now?
Well, first of all, significant progress was made. And one of the most important things that happened over the course of the last 4 years when, as a nation, we were dealing with a very challenging set of negotiations with an American administration that came into office in 2017 that brought in crippling tariffs on steel and aluminum. They're now gone. We've renegotiated the NAFTA Accord, the new USMCA, which I hope does come into effect. There may be those who will state that it could have been better, but better is always possible. But in the light of the circumstances of what happened, we believe that that was a very significant achievement on the part of our government. Now, moving forward, I indicated that the issue of bankruptcy and insolvency law is an important one to be addressed, and if I am honored to be given the opportunity to serve, it's one of the areas that I do intend to work very hard on.
Thank you very much. Jason Lopez from the Green Party. Once upon a time, scientific consensus was that the Earth was flat, that the sun rotated around Earth, and spontaneous generation was a real thing. Science can and has changed over years. So should those who disagree with your absolute belief that there is a climate crisis be heard, or should their voice and their skepticism be dismissed and shut down?
Look, first of all, I'm a big believer in freedom of speech, okay? So even if you're a flat earther and you want to talk about it, I'm not going to stifle your ability to say that. But let's get something straight here. There is no doubt that there's a climate crisis. There's no doubt that it's happening. I mean, this has been confirmed by pretty much every scientific body, by the World Health Organization, by the World Economic Forum, by the United Nations. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, the Bank of Canada recently said that climate change was one of the key risks to our financial sector. So the time for debate is over. I mean, if you look at what happened, you just want to look at the historical record. 255 million years ago, we had a climate catastrophe called the Great Dying, when temperatures went up to 10 degrees and 95% of all life went extinct.
10 seconds.
Okay? This is something that has happened in the past, that is something that we know that is real. Is it going to happen in our lifetime? Probably not, but it's definitely going to happen if we do not take action in order to stop it.
Thank you very much. Monica Ciriello from the Conservative Party of Canada. Andrew Scheer's answer to solve the growing gun problem is to give a lifetime ban to anyone convicted of a weapons offense. But if someone is already willing to use a gun and risk going to jail, how is telling them they can't have one again really going to stop them? We tell people not to drink and drive, and we punish those who do, but Statistics Canada says 1 in 6 drunk drivers reoffend. Why would gun users not do the same?
Thank you for the question. It's very important, specifically here in Hamilton, where we've seen an increase in crime over the last 4 years. So banning guns, as now is being proposed, and similar to Bill C-71, is senselessly targeting law-abiding gun owners. These proposals that are being put forward fail to address gun crime and do nothing to keep our streets and our communities safe. Simply asking for law-abiding gun owners to follow more rules is not going to help. So in addition to repealing Bill C-71, and we want to make sure that we're getting tough on crime as a whole, we want to make sure that we have our law enforcement agencies equipped with the right necessities and resources to do their job and crack down on illegal gun smuggling. In addition to prison time for anyone that has knowingly possessed a gun. Lifetime bans for firearms are also going to make a difference in order to keep our communities safer.
Thank you. Matt Green from the NDP, I want to stick with that topic. Hamilton has had a surge in gun violence in recent years. As a city councillor, former city councillor, you're well aware of this. This week we had 3 shootings in 12 hours in your riding. Jagmeet Singh has said he would like to empower cities to ban handguns. Yet, unless police stop and check people randomly for weapons, we will generally only catch them while an act is being done or after a crime has been committed. Trouble is, any person committing such a criminal act is already breaking several laws that are on the books and already showing they're willing to risk going to jail for breaking those laws. So what kind of deterrent would one more charge or whatever kind of fine a city could impose be to these people?
Well, you know, we can talk about gun bans all you want, but by the time somebody has a gun in their possession and they're willing to use it, it's already too late. The social science is very clear. Through massive investments in social programming for youth, we can offset these predeterminants for youth violence. I had an opportunity to meet with a mother this week who lost her son this summer, not to gun violence, but to violence. And we know that through providing after-school programs and providing alternatives for youth, that we can deal with the key determinants to violent youth crime. And so, you know, as a new Democrat, I'm very proud about our investments and our commitments to youth and understanding that that is the key way to offset violence in our communities.
Thank you very much. Melina Mamone from the People's Party. During your opening statement, you talked about coming from a family of immigrants that came to Canada. And yet your party wants to cut immigration numbers significantly. But once upon a time, your family came here and was welcomed. So does it not become hypocritical to say, not only did my family deserve to come here, and now not only do I deserve to run for office in this new country, but others can't come here and enjoy the same opportunity?
Well, just to clarify, Maxime Bernier is not against immigration. In fact, he publicly declares that Canada was built on immigrants, and he applauds that. What he is challenging is the idea of controlled borders, not to allow an influx of people who come in where Canada's infrastructure, economy, and housing can't support that. When my parents were immigrants, they came in with the proper documentation in their hand, and there were like a point system. In the past, it was 600 points where you would identify your skills, how you would contribute to Canadian society, how would you support yourself. Whereas now it's been reduced to less than 200. So to say that my parents, that I'm a child of immigrants, the situations are very, very different. So you're comparing two different things.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for answering those questions. We'd now like to move to the open forum. The way this is going to work, we're going to follow the same number, the same order, which means that Jasper Kajaski from the Liberal Party, you can ask a question of any candidate. We will allow that candidate to answer for a reasonable time, and then the floor is open to everyone else. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Certainly the question goes out to everybody, and I look forward to the conversation about it, but it's directed primarily at my Conservative colleague. Given the fact that the Conservatives like to say that they're for the people, but then they cut taxes for the wealthy and cut services for everybody else. We lived this reality for 10 years under Stephen Harper. It is now our current reality under Doug Ford. How can the voters of Hamilton Centre trust that a Conservative federal government would not continue cutting services for all Canadians?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. And one thing I want to clarify is I think you're misleading the voters by campaigning against someone who's not on the ballot. So when you're bringing up Doug Ford, we are not associated with Doug Ford. Andrew Scheer has a different plan for Canadians. Under an Andrew Scheer Conservative plan, we will lower your taxes. We will ensure that we scrap your carbon tax, and we will take the GST off of home heating. And we're going to do it by taking the corporate welfare that you have spent billions of dollars giving to wealthy stakeholders and executives and redirect that to the Canadian people.
So are you indicating that you're not supporting the Ford government and the policies of the Ford government? Is that the official position of the Scheer-led Conservatives?
That is not what I said. What I said is you're misleading the voters by campaigning against Doug Ford when it's Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives that are currently on the ballot. So to answer your question about keeping life more affordable under a Conservative government, we absolutely will, and we can by ensuring that we lower their taxes. We're going to scrap the carbon tax, which you have implemented, which has costed hundreds of thousands of dollars for Canadian families, making it harder for them to consistently get ahead. And we're going to do it based on cutting the corporate welfare that you consistently provide your wealthy stakeholders.
I find it very interesting that both we have Liberals and Conservatives who spent decades governing for the rich and not the rest of us now talking about eliminating corporate welfare, when at the end of the day, 87 families collectively own the same amount of the lowest earning 12 million Canadians. And that just in growth and wealth enjoyed by the wealthiest 87 Canadian families from 2012 to 2016, it was $807 million per family. That is 10,000 times the growth of wealth than the average family over the same 4 years. So we have a situation here where we're the only party who is really committed to closing the tax loopholes and going after the ultra-wealthy in this country, folks that have $20 million in wealth and more, by providing a wealth tax, a 1% wealth tax. We don't have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem, and it's been both the Conservatives and the Liberals over the last 150 years of this country who have allowed corporations and big business interests to take their tax-paying dollars and go offshore.
But you,
Ms.
Matthew,
Mamoni, sorry, Ms. Mamoni was waiting.
Thank
Yep.
you. Matthew Green, you're going to eventually run out of people to tax. You're saying that you're going to tax the wealthy. If you overtax them, then they'll just take their business
They're
abroad.
already gone. They've already packed it up. Just look at U.S. Steel when they went bankrupt and left everybody with pensions and benefits on the lurch trying to make decisions of whether or not they were going to cut their pills in half or pay their rent. Look at Hamilton Specialty Bar. Just today, AIM tore that building down. Smoke everywhere. That was Bain Capital that came in here and bankrupted that business. So this idea that providing tax cuts are going to keep these businesses onshore is a lie. Free trade has left us in this situation where we have people right now who work their entire lives for benefits and pensions, only to see them stolen in bankruptcy. And that's because we had a Liberal government and a Conservative government who sat on their hands through CCAA, through the collective bankruptcy agreements. They promised, and they did promise, that they were going to open up those agreements to the steelworkers. Instead, what the steelworkers get? They got thrown out of the office.
Well,
and it's
PPC has a
disdain
different
for working class people in this country, the people who built this country, that deserve to have more respect in their years for
The
retirement.
People's Party of Canada has a different approach. It will create fertile and fair conditions so that Canadians can prosper on their own merit, as opposed to just collect from
What does that mean?
from taxes and then redistribute it in a manner which they
Look,
think
the
is
Harvard
effective.
Business Review has shown that there is no trickle-down effect. Okay, we don't want to be the country with the lowest corporate taxes, the lowest wages, the loosest regulations. That's
No,
what we
I'm
call. That's
talking
what we
about-
call. That's what we call the race to zero. Okay, what we need is income redistribution. Okay, we have low unemployment and we have people struggling to get by. Okay, we have precarious
Why
employment,
should your
not
government
full-time employment.
dictate how to redistribute?
It already
in
is.
fact, your government, all the governments included, you're going to increase the general taxation, increase income tax, and capital gains tax by the NDP is going to increase it by 75%. How will that help the
You're
average
acting as though
family?
Maxime Bernier wasn't a Conservative for most of his life. You know,
He
didn't
left
just show up
because
out of
he
nowhere.
wanted to preserve
He decided and he
conservative
voted
ideas.
and supported for every Conservative policy right up until the minute he didn't win leadership. And then when he didn't win leadership, he saw an opportunity to drive a massive
That's
wedge in this
incorrect.
country
That's
through xenophobic
incorrect.
and racist
That's
policies,
incorrect.
hoping that they can catch the 2 or 3%
That's
that they might catch in the
incorrect.
polls.
Matthew, what about if we get back to the carbon tax for a second? Because the Conservatives want to get rid of it. The Liberals brought it in the first time ever that there's a price on pollution. I'm presuming you support the carbon tax.
I do support the carbon tax, but this conversation about climate change is not about the carbon tax. We can't buy
part
or
of it.
spend our
Carbon
wages.
tax
We cannot buy or
has
spend
been
our way out of
outlined
climate
by
Just
all
one second.
parties, saying that the goal is to reduce CO2 emissions. In the past, it's been clear that CO2 emissions has been reduced without a carbon tax and without the Paris
I
Agreement.
wanna
hold on
bring
a
that-
sec.
I wanna bring
We're going to
things
jump
back
in
to
for
the
a second.
carbon tax.
We're going to jump in. You're up next, Jason. So if you want to ask a question about the carbon tax, we're going to move to the next topic, so you get to ask. So feel free. If that's your question, please go ahead.
It's not. I'll ask my question though. So Jasper, my question's for you. With a $50 break-even price on Alberta bitumen compared to $10 for Saudi oil, can you guarantee that the government will recuperate the almost $14 billion invested in the Trans Mountain Pipeline, especially considering China has already committed to banning the internal combustion engine?
The bottom line with the Trans Mountain Pipeline is, number one, with regards to pipelines, the safest way to transport that material is through pipelines. We
That's
don't
false.
want
That's false.
That is
Bitumen
the
can
truth.
bitumen can be transported as a solid.
Do you
That has
really
been
want to be?
established.
Do you really want to be
Pipelines is the
transporting this stuff on rail
safest way.
and look at the disasters that have happened? We don't want it on our highways. Now, at the same time, we want to move towards a fossil-free society. We have an emissions goal
But
towards
how do you do that?
2050
By expanding fossil fuel production.
by also having a number of other clean energy projects that the government has been investing in and will continue to invest in as the number of years go forward.
So basically you're saying the province of Ontario is responsible for reducing emissions while the province of Alberta gets off scot-free.
Every
and
dollar
we're responsible.
made-
The oil
No.
sands are the largest, most polluting industrial structure in the history of this planet.
Every dollar that is going to be made by the federal government through the Trans Mountain expansion will be invested in clean energy projects. So the whole concept is you have to be able to merge economic sustainability with environmental consciousness. It's very easy to say we just want to be fossil-free yesterday.
But
At
you
the same
didn't
time,
answer.
the other
You didn't
part-
actually answer. Can I get
Let
an
him
answer to my
finish and then
question?
go back. Let him answer and then
Okay,
go back.
but he didn't answer my question. My question was an economic question. I'm asking, how long will it take for us to get this money back? Can he guarantee the $15 billion we're spending on this project will come back when China is already committed to banning the internal combustion engine, and marine regulations that kick in next year are going to make 20% of oil sands oil unusable? So how is this not going to be a stranded asset? That's my question.
What we're
It's
doing
a
is
fair question.
we're diversifying markets in order to get a fair price for the products that
From
we
who?
sell. From the customers that are buying it, Jason.
And
You know,
who's that?
Budgets are all about priorities, and here's a situation again with this P3 model, right? They're taking the public tax dollars and giving it away to private corporate interests. The saddest part is that they could spend $14 billion on a pipeline while spending less than the Conservatives did on housing, a pittance. $2.5 billion a year in affordable housing. Well, we have waiting lists in the thousands here. It is only the NDP who have a very clear housing strategy that will result in the direct investment of 500,000 affordable units right here across the country to ensure that we have people living in safe and dignified places.
Matthew Green,
Well,
your
hold on.
point is a little bit misleading because the Singh announced that he would build 500,000 affordable units in the next 10 years. However, his immigration policy also permits the influx of 370,000 immigrants per year.
I'm not sure
In
you understand
Just a
how-
minute, please, let me finish. In 10 years, that equates to 3.7 million influx of people.
People and
So
units
if-
are not the
if-
same
If you let
thing.
me
People
finish,
move in with
let me
families, they
finish.
move into units.
Let her finish
but
and then
It's
answer.
not actually a question.
So then
You'll
that
be able to-
I'll get to the question. So that equates to 3.7 million in the next 10 years. In effect, you are short 3.2 million housing units. I'm trying to point out that your policies
I'm trying to
are-
point out that your math is
I'm
actually
trying
quite
to-
terrible.
I'd just like to point out, I
10
think we've
years
drifted
times
off Jason's
370,000 is
question.
I think you're
3.7
right.
million.
We are
Yeah,
talking, I'm
we're
going to jump,
talking
thank you.
about-
I'm going to
Finish
jump
it?
in, Melina, you'll be able to ask your housing
We've
question in a
drifted
moment.
off of Jason's
We have.
question.
If
Bottom
anyone-
line is that additional corporate tax revenue alone could be around $500 million a year once the project is up and running. So
500 million a year, so how many years to recover the $15 billion? I mean, you think by 2030 that same amount of oil is going to be in demand? Like I said, China has already committed to banning the internal combustion engine. They're already doing it in Hubei province already, okay? And again, like I said, international marine regulations, and you can look it up, they kick in 2020, are going to make our high sulfur content bitumen oil unusable in marine. Now, that's a huge customer for Alberta Oil. So this is basically going to become a pipeline to nowhere. It's going to become what they call a stranded asset, and we're going to be on the hook for it. Why do you think Kinder Morgan walked away from the project? They're in a for-profit business. They're not going to walk away unless they feel there's no money to be made, and there's not. And our fool of a prime minister decided, hey, we'll pony up the money and buy it.
Mr. Kajaski, you have an opportunity to answer, and then we're going to move to the next question.
I think these are somebody, Jason is obviously not in support of the project, so he's going to put forward, in fairness, I understand why you might do that. The bottom line is that over 190,000 people are directly employed in oil and gas. That does not include spin-off employment that occurs in this industry. This project is going to bring in significant revenues, corporate revenues, once the project is up and running, and there's every indication that it will potentially revert back to the private sector once the project is in place.
Thank you.
I agree with one thing that you said, that yes, 190,000 people are employed in the oil and gas sector, so that's why we need to transition them to the new economy.
Thank you very
not
much.
keep pumping money into the oil sands.
Monica
Just going on,
Ciriello,
thank
is
you.
your question, if you can go with that, or you can go with another question.
I'm going to give a quick comment just on the pipeline, and then I'm going to answer my question because I didn't have a chance to jump in there. Oil, natural gas, and energy put food on the table for hundreds of thousands of Canadian families, including right here in Hamilton. And as a Conservative government, we are pro-pipeline. We want to get that oil to market so that not only can our energy sector do even better and thrive as a government, and we are able to then ensure that the steel industry here in Hamilton is thriving as well. I will
Question.
transition to my question. Okay, so my question is for Matthew Green. I spoke with a woman named Janet. She lives just off of Barton Street in the riding that you used to represent as a city councillor. She told me that in the last election, she voted NDP, but this time she's going to vote Conservative. This is because she no longer feels safe in her community. She doesn't even feel safe walking to her local Tim Hortons. She outlined in detail the amount of crime, drugs, and violence that take place on her street and in her front yard. We know a Conservative government will get tough on crime and gangs and work collaboratively with the men and women of our police force. However, considering your complicated history with the Hamilton Police, how will you be able to collaboratively work with the law enforcement to ensure that someone like Janet feels safe again in her community?
You know, it's no surprise to me that for somebody who doesn't live in the riding, you would frame our community that way. I'm a very proud Hamilton Centre resident, and certainly we have had and inherited our fair share of social pressures. There is no doubt that decades of deep austerity and cuts to social programming, ODSP and Ontario Works that have been stagnant since before Harris, have left people out of this economy. We are also facing a crippling opioid crisis. To that, I make no apologies. But I can tell you that it is through investments in housing, it is through investments in education, it is through investments in our social services, in our youth, and in our employment that will provide opportunities for people to have alternatives to where they're ending up to in life right now. To think that you can criminalize mental health and opioid addictions. We've seen 20% of our municipal budgets go to policing, and yet all the crimes that you're touting right now continue to happen. And if you think that it's because of some kind of personal grudge that the police have against me, then that's a whole other conversation. I believe in our frontline law enforcement workers. They have a huge budget to work with, but I would like to see significant investments in the things that matter, the predeterminants of health, the things that we know in Hamilton Centre lead people to have a 61-year life expectancy, while in places like Flamborough, where you live, it's 81 years. It's that kind of profound and deep inequality that we're seeking to solve right now.
Thank you.
I would like to just address it in two fronts. One, first of all, I feel like you did not, unfortunately, answer my question about being able to work with the police here in Hamilton. So to Janet, who is watching tonight, I hope that is satisfactory to you. To address the other question about me saying that I don't live in Hamilton, I do live in Hamilton. I am a resident of this city, and I worked downtown at City Hall with residents and small business owners. This type of question would be better suited for someone like your NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, who's originally from Brampton, but then chose to run in a riding 4,000 kilometers away in Burnaby, BC.
Well, this is where,
This is a very interesting conversation, but I think it would be nice to get it back to the whole issue of what's happening right here in the riding. And I think, in fact, Matthew's point is one that I'd like to pick up on, which is that in the criminal justice system, which is where I work, we have, in fact, criminalized mental health problems, people with schizophrenia, people that consistently get into problems, people that have drug addictions. And we have to move towards a much more, I think, sympathetic way of dealing with people so that we keep them out of jail and in programs. And that's why the government has invested in a poverty reduction strategy which has $22 billion of combined investments. We have significant investments going into mental health and community and home care, $11 billion. These are the kind of programs which are hopefully going to start to turn the tide. And by suggesting in some way that Hamilton Centre is specifically under service is just not fair. This is the urban core of Canada's 10th largest city. We have very old infrastructure. It's a very diverse community, but it's a welcoming community. It's a loving community. Have there been hate-filled incidents? Without question, and they are going to be addressed, and they are being addressed. But the bottom line is this. This is a strong community. It's doing its best to get ahead of these problems. Our government is investing in trying to get mental health issues, the opioid crisis addressed, other significant things. But one has to be very, very careful about trying to, in some way, suggest that there's an inherent problem that's caused by people here as opposed to something that the people here are trying to solve.
No, it's a pathology of poverty. It's a typical conservative speaking point.
She's concerned when she's walking down her street that she doesn't feel comfortable. She
Well,
wants to ensure.
a lot of times, Monica, people won't feel comfortable when they see somebody that could possibly be addicted to opioids or addicted to drugs. What we have to do is treat these people like the human being that they are,
By
and
no
offer them
means
treatment
are we
and not,
saying
and
that
not,
this
and we
person.
don't
Oh, but you are.
criminalize
But
them.
I'm not.
A lot of
Because
people
under
don't-
the Respect
your
for
answer is
Communities
more law
Act,
enforcement.
under the Respect for Communities Act that your party put in place under David Sweet, you made it impossible to have supervised injection sites. You made it impossible to provide compassionate care to people dealing with opioids. You would rather see people suffer and die in the streets than provide first-line medical care to our most vulnerable people dealing
I'm
with
not sure
addiction.
I'd
That
go
is
so far as that on a personal level,
That is
Matthew.
simply not
No,
true.
I
And to
wouldn't go
go
that
to
far on a
that
personal
length
level.
is completely
I'm
unacceptable.
certainly not going that far on a personal level, Monica, but I'll certainly say this. Our budget, the Liberal budget in 2018, invested $231 million to support a range of actions to improve treatment, address stigma, and gather more data to make a real difference. And you can run away from Doug Ford and you can say, oh, we're not running for Doug Ford, we're running for Andrew Scheer. But they're two halves of the same coin. The bottom line is this. Conservative policies in this province have put us all into jeopardy. I just met a woman during my campaign around the area of Barton and Sherman, and she had her severely autistic son there, who was receiving in the range of about $1,500 a week in funding. As of now, that money is gone, just gone. And multiple other programs have been cut. And federal conservative governments have done exactly the same thing. So to suggest that the conservative government nationally is going to be any different than the Ford government, if you want to do that, you should put the word progressive back in your party. You took it out, and it shows in the kind of policies. And that's what we're afraid of. We're afraid of a conservative
I'm
government.
going to jump in here. Matthew Green, it is your turn.
Thank you very much. And I alluded to the question, although it didn't get answered before, and this question is to my colleague Jasper. Jasper, we talked about budgets and priorities. Your government prioritized the purchase of a private pipeline in the tens of billions of dollars, and yet your government only funds affordable housing at $2.5 billion a year, with estimates over your national housing strategy for it to decline, where you're actually going to spend less on affordable housing. Given the housing crisis that Hamilton is in right now, and given the lackluster housing strategy that you've put forward, what do you say to the residents that are waiting on the affordable housing wait list today?
The bottom line is this. This government has committed to a $40 billion project, the first ever national housing strategy. It's moving forward with a plan. It's going to reduce chronic homelessness by 50%. We're going to remove more than 530,000 households from housing need. We're creating 100,000 new housing units, repairing and renewing more than 300,000 housing units, protecting an additional 385,000 households from losing an affordable place to live. Just here in Hamilton, I'm sure you're well aware, a $2 million investment in the Inwell project at the Houston Baptist Church.
Which came in under the Harper government. That's where the funding came from, not the Liberal government.
And there's also some clarity that needs to be had. You stated a $40 billion investment. That's not for affordable housing. That's for the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, and they're very different things. And as the former vice chair of City Housing Hamilton, I know that the Liberals like to make big-ticket announcements on funding, but make it darn near impossible for nonprofits and social housing providers to actually access the housing funds. We know that because we have so many units offline that if we just had a federal partner in the past Liberal government, we would have been able to address at least 1,000 units online